Welcome to our Brownback seminar. Unfortunately, we have to do it online once more because of restrictions in the rooms. So we decided to move, as we did in the last semester, our presentations online. So welcome to our Brownback seminar. Dilek Özkan will be presenting. She's a visiting fellow at the center at the moment, and otherwise a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Macedonia, the Department of Balkan, Slavic, and Oriental Studies. And she also completed her PhD not long ago at the University of Athens and has been a fellow in Oxford and elsewhere. And she will be presenting her research on migrants, refugees, and borders between Greece and Turkey. We'll have the presentation as usual, and then afterwards there will be time for questions and answers. So without further ado, I would give you the floor, Dilek, and looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So I start in order not to lose time. Looking back to the history of borders and migration between Greece and Ottoman Empire, in this paper I'm aimed to answer if we can draw any parallelism between their approach to historical borders and migrations and the current crisis. The presentation consists of three parts. In the first part, I start with the Emir Crisis of 1996. Then I move to the historical borders between Ottoman Empire and Greece in 1832, 1881, and finally in 1923. In the second part, I'm aiming to examine the migration history between two countries, starting from the emergence of Greek state until the population exchange of 1923, and seeking their approach to the migrants and refugees during this period. In the third part, again putting the migration in the center, I'm looking at how approaching issues related to migration intermingle with political disputes between two states from 1923 until our times. It should be noted that this research is still in a draft mode, and in order to stick to the 30 minutes rule, I had to omit many parts, which was not also easy. Let's start. I will start with Emir Crisis. You all know maybe. It happened in 1996, which brought Turkey and Greece to the brink of war. It was not because of a fishing boat that ran ashore on a small rocky island between Bodrum and Kos in the Aegean Sea. The Turkish captain of the boat rejected the help of the Greek sea guards, claiming that he is in Turkish waters. The Turkish side considered the same and communicated accordingly with the Greek authorities. Greeks, on the other hand, claimed the opposite. Meanwhile, the boat was salvaged. It was also Christmas time. Both sides closed the issue without further escalation. Suddenly, a month later, a Greek magazine ran a story about it in a way to test the newly formed Greek government. Agitated by the news, some Greeks landed on the islet and planted a Greek flag. Then two Turkish journalists landed there with a helicopter and took pictures with a Turkish flag, which broadcasted on television as well. Next day, naval forces of two countries took positions. Even a team of Turkish special forces organized an operation. Finally, by the intervention of the USA, the two countries agreed on retreat and paused the issue for a while. They were forced to understand then that there are more serious problems in the region than these small islets. After 20 years now, we know that the role of the media in both countries was crucial, fueling the crisis. The Emir Crisis was the peak of already deteriorated Turkish-Greek relations following Turkey's intervention in Cyprus in 1974. It was a new era of provocations, and the press of both countries helped to strain their relations more. The Cyprus issue, the continental shelf debate, sovereignty in the Mediterranean Sea, and the maritime borders were the main subjects that occupied the political agenda of both states since the 1980s. Greece was conveying the message of Turkish threat to the EU and NATO, thus putting an obstacle in front of Turkey's EU entry negotiations, whereas Turkey described Greeks as aggressive and not negotiable. Although showing the crisis as a victory of Turkey defeating an enemy country, it might help the construction of national morale in Turkey, and therefore help the politicians to gain time while trying to form a coalition government after the Emir Crisis. Repairing the Turkish-Greek relations after Emir Crisis was most unlikely. And this anti-Greek discourse, which was fueled by the Turkish media, increased the historical tensions against Europe, Cyprus, and Greece, began to affect Turkey's EU negotiations. Although in the beginning of 1999, a large scale of cooperation was signed between two countries and the Kurdish leader Öcalan was delivered to Turkey, it was insufficient to influence public opinion. In order to reverse this situation, an unexpected event was necessary, which was realized by the earthquake in 1999 in Izmit, help of Greek people for rescuing earthquake victims was an opportunity for the Turkish press to change the image of Greeks and Greece. All of a sudden, the image of Greeks turned from enemy into friend, good neighbors, and brother. Let's move to another victory in history, again for Turkish people, the Ottoman Greek War of 1897. Then German General Goldmar von der Goltz, who believed that the carnage of war was the most beautiful thing in the world, trained Ottoman soldiers and reorganized the Ottoman army after their catastrophic defeat by Russian army in 1878, which General Goltz was also the organizer of the Ottoman War against Greece in 1897, which lasted only 1 month and ended by Ottoman victory. The Ottoman War in Thessaly was narrated by historians with great enthusiasm. What makes it so popular for Turkish historians is not only because it was the last war that the Ottomans had initiated and won, it was because there were first-time war reporters who participated in the war and closely followed the war and published their observations and images of Ottoman soldiers and generals fighting in the battlefields. It was again the symbolic representation of the Ottoman victory in order to fix the national pride after losing huge territory in the Balkans. The Ottomans probably knew that the political game of that time had been based on balance of powers, and the great powers, especially Russia, would not allow Ottoman army to approach Athens. And it had happened like that. 120,000 Ottoman soldiers had to retreat 200 kilometers away from the Greek capital, Athens. Although it was mostly known that Ottomans declared the war because of Crete, and after the war they had to accept the new status of Crete as an autonomous state, so except fixing national pride and confidence, what Ottomans gained as a result of war was in fact a slight improvement of Ottoman Greek borders, which was demarcated in 1881. Making borders with Greece was not an easy thing for Ottomans. Now we will see how Ottomans and Greeks had their first borders in 1832. The Ottoman Sultan then Mahmud II had responded violently to the Greek uprisings and never accepted to negotiate with Greeks and did not give an inch of cooperation on this matter until the end of Russian War, 1828. At the end of the war, by signing the Treaty of Adrianople, Ottoman Empire complied with the decisions of London Protocols of 1830 and 1832, which determined the political status and the borders of new state. As a result, a border commission consisting of representatives of European powers gathered in Ottoman capital and discussed in detail where to pass the border line exactly. I have a book chapter on this issue recently. Came out, European Revolutions and the Ottoman Balkans. So you can see these discussions in more detail here. I will highlight some characteristics of the borders now here. During the discussions of where to put the first borders of Greek state, European powers supported the idea of using geographical features as natural barriers. As they mentioned several times, they had something like the borders between France and Spain in the Pyrenees in their minds. So what they aimed was to create a natural boundary. According to them, mountain chains separating Thessaly from central Greece were the most suitable ones. It would follow a continuous line west to east through mountain peaks. The border discussions also manifested that Ottoman delegates significantly lacked geographical knowledge of the region, and their maps were outmoded and did not indicate well the geographical features like rivers and mountains. Therefore, they had to rely on European maps, which were more advanced. During the demarcation process of the border, the Ottoman representative was also not collaborating with other demarcation committee members. And in the middle of the demarcation process, based on his disagreements with others, he left the meetings. So border demarcation works were completed without an Ottoman presence. In fact, the demarcation committee found many differences between the instructions were given them and the real geography in the area. Especially in the eastern part of the boundary, there were no such mountain peaks as it was described. So they had to make some changes, which many times ended up taking more land from the Ottoman side of the border. As in the case of Mount Veluki, they found its real location lower than they expected. So they proceeded north until they found similar hills. Or sometimes names of the villages were written in slightly differently than the real names, which created confusions among the committee members, as in the case of Granica, it's written here. Disregarding these controversial issues, border committee put contemporary border marks on the land, prepared the border maps, and submitted them to the Ottoman authorities in 1835. But in subsequent years, these disputed locations came into the agenda, especially when there was cross-border crime like banditry. As it concerns the border management, Ottomans turned over the border duties to the Albanian irregular forces, who were mostly ex-bandits. The situation was not very different on the Greek side of the border. However, the border region was under close observation of European consulates, as their countries had trade and mining interests in the region. They often complained and insisted on reforms, pressing for more security measures alongside the borders, and finally requested removal of irregular soldiers and their replacement with regulars. The need for change became inevitable after 1855. Thessaly, after insurrections happened in Thessaly and Epirus. Suppressing the uprisings in the region, Ottomans initiated also topographical surveys and plans of the borders for the first time, and began construction of new border stations, like we see in this one. After we have Ottoman-Russian War of 1878, which also opened up Ottoman Greek border question, and Greece wanted Thessaly, we know, and it was actually the annexation of Thessaly to Greece happened as a result of Treaty of Berlin. And it was actually the diplomatic victory of Greek delegates who were at the Congress of Berlin in 1878. At the end, by signing the Treaty of Berlin, Ottomans accepted renegotiating, reopening the border issue with Thessaly. So they accomplished to include an article which required reconsideration of Ottoman Greek borders in Thessaly. Although Ottomans were reluctant to discuss and reopen the border issue with Greece, as German Chancellor Bismarck intervened as a mediator and made it clear for the Ottomans that refusing it would mean another war, which would be a defeat of Ottoman army. Meetings for the reconsideration of Ottoman Greek borders finalized in 3 months in 1881. Next month, the border demarcation committee began their work. While the committee proceeded marking the frontier line and drawing topographical maps, there were frequent disputes between Ottoman and European committee members. In several locations, the Ottoman members disagreed with the other members, and again, they protested and they left the committee. Europeans continued their works again, and the border maps were prepared and delivered to the two parties, but these disputed areas again remained on table until the end of Ottoman Greek War of 1897. It seems that Ottoman border management was quite functional after 1881, although there were frequent conflicts between the Greek border soldiers and border crossings and cross-border crimes. By the end of the century, the Ottoman Greek border began to take a form of a modern border institution, despite its isolated location. There were passport controls, security checks, custom offices, and regular soldiers with modern uniforms and guns. The new border police stations were numbered around 80, which should have been a huge cost actually on already collapsed Ottoman economy. We can remember that the Ottoman government declared bankruptcy in October 1875 and increased taxes on outlying provinces, including the Balkans, in the following years. In 1912, Ottoman army was defeated against the joint army of Balkan nations. As a result, Ottoman authorities in Thessaloniki signed an agreement to turn over the city to the Greeks. Therefore, after almost 80 years of land border experience in Thessaly with Greece, new borders of the empire in Europe were not anymore with Greeks, but with Bulgarians. Finally, in 1923, Greece and Turkey signed the Treaty of Lausanne, which defined their current land and sea borders, the situations of the islands as well. Compared to the Ottoman Greek borders in Thessaly, this time Turkish-Greek borders had very different nature. Instead of land borders, there was a 212 kilometers land river border in Thrace and sea borders with several islands in the Aegean Sea. It's worth mentioning that recently Lausanne Treaty became one of the hot issues between two countries after Turkish President Erdogan expressed his thoughts on it, saying that they are, he means Europe, trying to confine Turkey to the borders defined in 1923. And he said, Lausanne Treaty is not a holy text for me, which interpreted as he opened it up for discussion, which certainly annoyed Greeks a lot. Let's move now to the history of migration between two countries. The first Ottoman Greek borders did not aim for a total partition of ethnic religious communities. In the chosen area, the population was mixed with Muslims and Christians. However, it was provisioned that if the Muslims would remain in the Greek side of the border, they had to immigrate to the Ottoman side and allowed Ottoman Greeks to decide in 3 years whether to migrate to Greece or not. In other parts of Greece, for instance, in Peloponnese, the Muslims were either executed or were taken as captive during the Greek Revolution. Only 10 to 20% of their total population, which was 30,000 to 40,000 before the revolution, were managed to reach Anatolian shores. The same happened for the Greeks in Anatolia and Aegean Islands, especially during the early days of the Greek uprisings in 1821. The Ottoman forces targeted not only rebelling people, but considered all the Greek Orthodox people as potential rebels, attacked them, and as a result, thousands of people, in order to escape from Ottoman punishment, had to migrate towards Greece to find safer places. Following the demarcation of the borders, mobility between two sides continued. There was also a trend among the Greek subjects of the empire. They were traveling to Greece in order to take Greek citizenship and return back to Ottoman Empire with Greek passports, which would exempt them from paying some taxes and provide European protection. In the 1860s, there were around 60,000 Ottoman Greeks holding Greek passports, which annoyed Ottoman authorities and created a conflict between the Ottoman and Greek government that lasted a considerably long time. Another hot topic between two states was Cretan Greek refugees settled in Greece during the revolution. Although in later years Ottomans initiated policies for their return, the number of Cretan refugees in Greece increased, especially after the revolts of 1841, 1858 and 1866 to 69. Crete became an autonomous state in 1897 and unified with Greece in 1908. Afterwards, another wave of migration began. This time, the Muslim population of the islands began to migrate towards the Ottoman lands. The majority of them had chosen Izmir as a first step, and when their numbers had reached 30,000 by the early 20th century in Izmir, the Ottoman authorities decided to relocate them to other places. There are hundreds of documents in the Ottoman archives about their relocations, construction of new settlements in various Ottoman times. Here we can see the relocated Cretan Muslims in Tripoli, Lebanon, in front of newly constructed masjid, praying for Ottoman Sultan for his help. Another photo, again from Tripoli, shows Cretan refugees in front of their newly constructed houses. Also, it should be noted that the annexation of Thessaly to Greece, there remained a small Muslim community in the region, as their religious and property rights were recognized by Greece under the Treaty of Berlin. The Muslim population of the region was around 40,000 before 1881, and following the border demarcation, majority of them migrated to the Ottoman Empire, and in subsequent years, by early 20th century, there were around 2,000 Muslims residing still in Thessaly. Another hot topic for the Ottoman Empire was Balkan refugees. Turkish historians estimated that Muslim migration flow towards the Ottoman Empire throughout the 19th century should be equal to 5 to 6 million. According to official Ottoman records, in 1914, there were around 1.2 million Muslim refugees in Anatolia that arrived after 1878. The biggest refugee groups in numbers were Caucasians and Crimean Muslims, then Muslims from Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Bosnia followed. For many Muslim refugees, the Balkan Wars meant a second destruction, as they had settled in the Balkan towns previous decades, their new settlements would remain under the borders, in the borders of Macedonia, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece. Many refugees from these places began their journey again towards Istanbul and also Anatolia. As for the empire's ruling elite, it became clear that after the Balkan Wars especially, the multi-ethnic empire was not possible, and their last hope was to preserve the existence of Muslim population in Anatolia. Especially after the Committee of Union Party came in power in 1913, the population studies and policies began to be used to create a Turkified population in Anatolia and in Thrace. A recent study of Fuat Dündar shows how the CUP government began to homogenize Anatolia and Thrace in favor of Muslims, and with a perspective of forming a Turkish nation. They implemented policies to settle and integrate the Muslim refugees, whereas they forced non-Muslim groups, populations to migrate, and they homogenized the population. As a result, firstly, a population exchange took place with Bulgaria. Around 50,000 Muslims and 50,000 Bulgarians were exchanged in 1914. Secondly, approximately 200,000 Greek Orthodox subjects were forced to leave from Thrace. Thirdly, approximately 1.5 million Albanians were forced to migrate out of Anatolia, and majority of them were killed or died during the deportation process. Also, many non-Muslim soldiers who were sent to labor battalion during the First World War, known as Amele Taburu, majority of them died due to the poor conditions, diseases, and misbehaviors of Ottoman authorities. The separation of Ottoman population was now I move to Lausanne Treaty and the population exchange of 1923. The last separation of population was determined in the Treaty of Lausanne in the form of compulsory population exchange for the Turks residing in the borders of Greece and for the Greeks in the borders of Turkey. According to the 1928 census in Greece, there were 1.2 million refugees in Greece, of which 1.1 million Greek refugees were from Turkey that had migrated to Greece in between 1922 and 1923. As for Turkey, the number of newcomers varies in different sources from 400,000 to 500,000. Those who were exempted from the population exchange of 1923, as we see in the next part, used as a tool or like a scapegoat under the political disputes between two countries. As we know, the Turks or Muslims in Thrace, in Greece, and Greek Orthodox population, Greek minority in Istanbul. Turkish government, especially during the one-party rule period, had initiated several projects to form a unified national identity, embracing all the refugees settled in Anatolia in different periods of time that they came, and from different places with different cultural backgrounds, with different languages. In order to succeed this policy, the refugees that had to forget their bad memories related to their refugee experiences and their previous places. Indeed, Muslim refugees left almost any written material about their experiences compared to existing works and studies on Greek refugees from Asia Minor in Greece, which began as early as following their settlement, and later on they managed to establish an archive based on oral history interviews with refugees. In Turkey, research interest on migration history started quite lately, and addressing the issue of population exchange was delayed until 1990s. After the population exchange, only 110,000 Greek Orthodox people remained in Turkey, and as we know, against systemic pressures and discriminations targeted Greek Orthodox population, especially after violent clashes began from 1950s between Turks and Greeks in Cyprus. The Greek minority in Turkey gradually migrated to Greece, and today there are only about 5,000 Greek Orthodox people living in Turkey. After the establishment of Turkish Republic, Turkey's role as a receiving country of unwanted Muslims of Balkan nations continued, especially as a result of dissolution of Yugoslavia and collapse of Soviet bloc. Turkey received some thousands of Muslim populations from Bosnia, Kosovo, Serbia, and Bulgaria. You can see these numbers in this table. Another large-scale migration flows happened following the revolutions in Iran during 1980s and the Gulf War in 1990. On the other hand, Greece gradually became a target country for migrants and refugees following its entry into the EU in 1981. According to the official numbers, there were only 90,000 migrants in 1986, which began to increase following the collapse of Soviet bloc again. There were also political asylum seekers from Turkey, mainly Kurds, from Iran, from Palestine. However, the biggest migrant group were Albanians, which comprised 65% of all migrants and refugees in Greece. Now, let's see the last 2 decades. The earthquake rapprochement that began in 1999 between Turkey and Greece also paved the way for signing a cross-border exchange agreement in 2000. And a year later, a protocol for the implementation of Article 8 of this agreement on combating crime, terrorism, drug trafficking, and illegal migration. We see then the numbers, and there was always reports on both sides accusing each other of not applying the regulations properly. It seems that in the last 5 years, 2 countries moved away from the earthquake friendship diplomacy as numbers of refugees crossing sea borders of Greece and Turkey increased, tensions increased as well. In 2015 was the peak. More than 800,000 of migrants arrived in Greece through sea borders. The majority of them ended their journey in the EU countries, Western EU countries. Increasing numbers of refugees directed European leaders to seek a deal with Turkey as a major transit country. So they found a deal basically to pay 6 million euros to Turkey to keep the refugees in Turkey. Currently, according to Turkish numbers, there are 3.6 million Syrian refugees residing in various cities in Turkey, and around 150,000 refugees residing in temporary hosting areas. Whereas in Greece, together with the migrant hotspots in the Aegean Islands, there are 125,000 refugees. After Turkey-EU deal in 2016, there was a visible drop in the numbers of irregular crossings. These numbers indicated clearly Turkey's role as a critical partner for the security of EU's borders. It also gave Erdogan a pretext to increase his bargaining power. As he did last March, he opened Turkish borders and encouraged refugees to leave for Europe. In this way, he tried to get political backup for Turkey's position in Syrian war and in the Mediterranean conflict with Greece, and also economic support for Syrian refugees. On the other hand, Greece, claiming herself kind of a transit country, transit state in the EU, as the majority of the migrants want to reach the Western European countries, she uses her position as an excuse for not providing necessary shelter and protection for refugees. Although the most of the refugees will end up being long-term residences in Greece after 2016. To conclude, it is very difficult situation now, especially as we know that there is this huge debate on natural gas search and continental shelf debate and economic zones. So I can only say at this stage that we can hope that this solidarity and friendly atmosphere that emerged after earthquake like happened in 1999, and just some days ago in Izmir, they started kind of sending friendly messages again. So we can hope that they can open up real discussions towards solving this political problem. And it is also important for these two unstable economies, Turkey and Greece. So I leave the ground for discussions now. Thank you.
Okay, Dilek, thank you so much for your presentation. And I would thank you for giving us this, in a certain way, large historical overview. And I should mention, of course, that your fellowship is part of the field of excellence, dimensions of Europeanization, and in particular, the call and the theme of the fellowships this academic year is the question of borders and how borders are crossed and managed. And I think this is, of course, what you've done in the presentation, is to put the question of borders at the center and how that borders in the relationship between Greece and Turkey. I would like to open the floor for questions, for comments. If you want to ask a question, you can use the raise hand function, and then you can just activate your microphone and your camera when I call on you, or you can also use the chat option to provide that particular function. Maybe I'll ask a kickoff question. I mean, maybe more about how these borders are understood by the two different countries, by Greece and Turkey. I mean, how are they framed? I mean, we know in the Balkans, in a number of cases, there's the argument of the border as being this kind of the bulwark of Christianity or the bulwark of Europe. So this idea that each country presents itself as a defender of some imaginary Europe. So how is this border talked about in the Greek context, and how is it talked about in the Turkish context? Is it like is it presented as in the discourse as a civilizational border or as a national border? So I'm just kind of curious to get your sense on how this border is talked about, basically.
Yeah, actually, for Greek side, as we know that there is this the idea of megali idea, which was creating the greater Greece, as there were also Greek Orthodox people living in rest of the Ottoman Empire. So borders were not considered as something stable and permanent. So they always in the form of temporary state. That's why in their understanding of borders. But for Ottomans, on the other hand, when they finally come out with Greece as with borders in 1832, they understood it. Okay, that's it. We gave you this part, and what you want. I mean, we cut you off, and so these are our stable borders, and don't intervene our let's say, populations, and because they were also trying to protect Greek Orthodox population, which were also Ottoman subjects. So they were always using this argument that Europe is involving in our internal issues and intervening the situation. So these are, these external factors were making things worse. So these are the things. So for Ottomans, they wanted to see the first border as a stable, and Greece never accepted it as stable borders. And as it became for later, if you are also asking Turkey and Greece, I think from the Turkish side also there is always, okay, what we had, this Misaki Milli borders, and what Ottoman had in their history, this huge area in the Balkans, and they lost everything. So there's always references what we had and what we have now. So they don't know also, the history actually and the agreements very well, especially about the islands. So they are considering that, the islands, they had, they were ours, and Greeks, they got it from Italians, and then it was wrong, and all this story. So there is also always questioning this, let's say, the agreements, and not accepting or kind of considering unfair the situation.
Thanks. We have Bilgin Ayata. Bilgin, do you want to ask your question now, and just turn on your mic and your camera so we can see you?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Dilek. Very interesting overview about such a dynamic phase of border making and exchange, right? So it's also quite, you chose a very long time, and even if you would just focus on one, right, we would have so much also still to discuss with that. So thank you, first of all, for that. There are many detailed things that come to my mind, but I just wanted to ask two questions and probably take up the other things while you are here in the fellowship and benefit from that. I was struck by the high number of Iranian refugees that you spoke for the time phase from 78 to 80. Mm-hmm. I think it was 1.5 million. That
there is some.
Is that that's really strong. I didn't hear it before to this high. Is that like an official number, or how did you?
No, I didn't check if it is correct with the official numbers. Actually, it is very difficult issue, finding
because it's
the numbers. It's also the issue for statistics and populations numbers from 19th century to 20th century. So I mean, although I try to stick on official numbers, but these some numbers I found was from other studies also. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for a final publication, I have to check it. But there is I know that there was also huge numbers, but I'm not very sure, of course, if it was 1.5 million. Most of these Iranian refugees, they used Turkey as a transit country. Actually, they didn't stay long, and they moved afterwards to United States and Canada, especially, and also Europe. So we can also
okay, because that was my question, right? What happened with them? Because their presence is not there in such a high number, and so either they would have gone back or continued further. So that's a very interesting story that has not been studied much. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, as far as a personal, let's say, experience, I had in my high school, we had some Iranian students.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. yeah, it would be just interesting if you find out more on that. And the second question is much more, general question, of course, that, given this, let's say, very dynamic border making, I mean, it is a constant battle that is not settled, as you also pointed out too, that the discussion about questioning the current borders is going on. What do you make out of it? I mean, you as a historian, you did the step and came to the present. So of course you need to position yourself now. So what can we take now from this long view for a better understanding of the current Turkish Greek relations, borderscape there?
I think we should wait the American elections tomorrow to decide, first of all, because I see that, yes, and also, during Ottoman Greek relations, yes, the big powers was very, determining. And in Turkish case, I think we are kind of confused because there is not really a very clear position also from Europe and also from USA, because Turkey's role became very critical. So I'm also confused. I mean, I don't think that, there will be hot, situations really, because they're also very, they are trying to prevent this kind of things in order not to close all this dialogue. I think, yes, Greek's policy is stable. Turkey tries, tries to find ways. So we will see.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I would like to give the floor now to Amra. Do you also want to put on your microphone and camera so we can see you a question? Then we have Fabio, and then we have Danko, who's in the chat. So Amra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Actually, my focus of studying and my future thesis is on Turkey and migrant crisis. So by listening to your presentation, I was trying to get the main point of the explanation of the historical border changing and with today's migration crisis, because in the beginning you mentioned the relations between the Greece and Turkey in the past and like the enemies, and then in the migration crisis that they became like friends. So I would like you, if you could explain a little bit more, what is the connection between the story about the border?
I lost you. Sorry.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Amra.
Yeah.
Okay. Amra, I guess there might be an issue with the connection. So I would suggest that we go to, because it wasn't enough for you to answer, Dilek, right? So we'll maybe see if she comes back and first ask Fabio then to ask his. Amra, you're back. Mm-hmm. You're back. You have to turn on the microphone. The microphone is turned off. And
sorry, I don't know what happened. So.
No, it just happens, these things. So just go ahead, pick up where you left off.
I don't know what was the last.
I think the question directly. Yes, you started
okay.
that.
Yeah. So actually, I didn't get the main point. What is the connection between the story about the borders in the past and today's, and nowadays, migrant crisis? I didn't see the connection. So if it's possible, if you could explain it a little bit more.
Yeah. Actually, yes, there is no very clear, connection with them, since Ottoman Empire is in the past and it was another state. But Greece had almost 80 years with Ottoman Empire history that they actually discussed and made borders between them, and these discussions actually conveyed to modern Turkey when they had the borders. So what we are seeing here, actually, their political conflicts related with borders also connects their approach to migration. So actually I said that this earthquake approachment started their also kind of collaboration for migration issues, because it was also forced by EU. I mean, they had to make deals and to resend migrants and accept some migrants, and this was the main things. And then actually I'm saying that this let's say rapprochement changed after Syrian migration crisis, because it also changed many things in their relations. So this is what I'm trying to, but it's, of course, I'm far away from, making full statements and this kind of arguments now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Fabio is next. Fabio, do you want to ask your question? Then we have 2 chat questions.
Yes, excuse me, but my camera doesn't work today.
Okay, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay. My question was somewhat related to AMRAS, to the extent that basically I wanted to ask if it could be correct to state that while in the 19th and the early 20th centuries, the issue on the delimitation of the Greek-Turkish border was mainly ethnic and political, if now we are not assisting toward a shift towards more merely economical questions rather than strictly ethnical or political. Thank you.
I didn't get it very well, I think.
Basically, my point is, would it be correct to say that the fights, the conflicts over the demarcation of the borders between Greece and Turkey in the past were mainly based on ethnical or political reasons, while today maybe the political or ethnical element is less important and economic is more relevant?
Yes, yes. Certainly, it is true. I mean, making borders, but actually where to put the border between Greece and Ottoman Empire was not actually, they were trying to, find places to separate population. Yes, of course it was, there was ethnic reasons and national, reasons. But when they were choosing places for making borders, the population was not that much on the table. Now, yes, after actually the Lausanne Treaty, I mean, it was end of war, and it was already the majority of population, they left, non-Muslims. So it is, yeah. But now, today, when we are looking at the border discussions, right, you can definitely say that there is also economic grounds. So I'm agreeing with your argument.
Thanks. Danko, you have a question. Do you want to ask it in person, or do you want me to read it out? So I think it would be nice if you could ask it in person.
Hello, hi.
Yes, hi, Danko. Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. And I think you can also see me. Hi.
I can see you. We can see you as well. It's even better also for Dilek to see people and not just hear them or read them. I think it's a nicer experience. So Danko, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for this nice presentation. And for another brown bag, I was actually missing them. So I was wondering, I would like to catch up a bit on Florian's question. So how are these like old narratives, like the myths which are existing there, like Erdogan is now trying to renegotiate this one specific border that you mentioned with Greece, like this Evros border. So can you just shortly comment on this, like how these old narratives are used in today's construction of the border and the other? And as we are going through this pandemic situation, and there has been all sorts of different kinds of travel bans, restrictions, medical support, and so on, could you quickly just say some words about how does this current situation affect the Greek-Turkish border relations?
Actually, yes, Erdogan said this in 2016 when he was already, hot debate with EU. And I mean, this is not something new that, the Islamic nationalist perspective in Turkey, that they were they are never happy with Lausanne Treaty. I mean, there are also one of the Erdogan's historical, let's say, advisor, Kadir Mısırlıoğlu. He's kind of a crazy guy. He's, saying a lot of arguments about, challenging this Lausanne Treaty. So he's probably, very well, affected from this kind of arguments. But of course, he's speaking to Turkish, mainly Turkish people, and he knows that his words will annoy the Greeks. And in 2019, actually, he changed his speech a little bit about Lausanne Treaty. So we see that, okay, the tensions so he kind of smoothed it, saying that, okay, yes, but we are, we should find ways to make our also, let's say, ways in the Mediterranean, because Lausanne Treaty didn't think about there will be also war zone, this economic sea zones, and also how it was the sea waters, or how will be the air, let's say, areas, borders. So, these dog fights between Turkish F-16s and Greek, war flights. It's, this kind of things still, I mean, hot topics between Greece and Turkey. So, I don't know what else to say about this, but I don't know actually what will happen. Of course, in their politics, because also Turkish economy is not going very well recently. So also Erdogan's votes are losing a lot. So maybe in next elections with a new government, we can have better relations with Greece. As it concerns the coronavirus and borders, yes, definitely it will change our perceptions and our ways of using borders. There are probably, there will be more restrictions also, elsewhere in Europe, when they are also entering, without borders and so on. Yeah.
Thanks. We have Susanna, who is next for the question. Susanna, would you be able to ask the question in person? Yes. Hi, Susanna. We just have to turn on the microphone. Great. Thanks.
Hi, Dilek. Thank you so much for your presentation. I wanted to ask you about the changing notions of these, or the changing definitions of migrant and refugee. Whether you see different used, or how our understanding has changed. Do you see some sort of an evolution, or is there are there similarities and parallels?
Thanks.
Okay. Actually, you know, the term refugees were very much used in the historical documents. So most of the people that were, you know, moving as a result of wars and ending up either in Ottoman Empire, they were called muhajir, and mostly, and also in the Greek case, they were called, in, let's say, French documents, or in French, they were exchanging, you know, diplomatic correspondences. Mainly, they were refugees. So the migrants, yeah, it was less used word actually until modern times. But of course, there are lots of research on this in you know, after First World War, as you say, and we have in Turkey, you know, also different terms used, mainly now göçmen, but muhacir or mülteci, sığınmacı, you know, these different terms that definitely, you know, needs to be also mentioned. Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Jovana Popovic, Jovana, you also have a question? I think that would be the last one. There's still some time, and it would be a good transition considering that you are presenting next week. So,
yes,
Jovana.
thank you very much. It's a very short question. Thank you, Dilek, for your presentation. I was wondering, because I'm really not very familiar with your topic, but I was very interested by the sources and the pictures you showed us, and about especially your photographs from the beginning of the century. And I was wondering, do you know maybe in which context were those taken, and by whom, and how are they, where are they kept, and do you use them also in your research? Is something? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for this question, because I really wanted to also explain my sources and my photographs, but it was not possible to include every detail. So the photographs, mainly the old photographs from late 19th century and beginning of 20th century, they are from the collection of Abdülhamid, the Sultan, Ottoman Sultan Abdülhamid's collection, which are largely digitalized, and they are public as well. I mean, there are really thousands of photographs, and the albums related with different topics. And of course, they were presenting to the Ottoman Sultan as, you know, like to see the situation, or the good situation. In this sense, the refugee settlements was presented to him in these photographs, like, you know, what you did, like you help all these poor people, and you make them new houses, although they are, you know, these houses looks really in very bad situations in most of cases. But it was again like you know, this benevolent character of Ottoman sultans. So they used in this context. Also, the Ottoman borders police stations, they were used to show him, you know, you spent that much money and you constructed all these buildings, so look at what you did. So it was in this concept. And also for the maps, majority of maps, they are from Ottoman archives, and mostly I'm using Ottoman archives documents, and I can read also Greek documents, so I also you know, using Greek documents, but mainly, yes, Ottoman sources, Ottoman archival sources. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the question. Thanks, Dilek, for the presentation and also the answers to the questions. So with that, I think we can conclude today's Brownback seminar. Jovana is going to be presenting next week. So that was a good transition, as I mentioned. She will be talking on the 10th of November, the manufacture of a Yugoslav culture, the Sokol movement in interwar Yugoslavia. So we'll send out a link. We'll have it on Zoom again, and hope that many of you will be able to join us. And in the absence of live meetings, at least to have an online conversation, which with all its limitations is still, I think, a good opportunity to get some ideas and food for thought. So Dilek, thanks a lot, and see all of you hopefully soon, virtually or in real life. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.